ESPN LA 710.
Joe McDonnell, you're the biggest radio announcer in LA.
How do you mean that?
No, I mean, I don't mean like that. Now, people refer to you as a Laker hater or someone that's critical, but the players love you, the coaches love you, Kobe loves you, everybody comes over, gives you exclusives. How do you explain that?
Because people who listen to radio shows are morons for the most part. They don't listen. I call them hearers. They're not listeners. Because just because I criticized Kobe Bryant during the summer for what he was doing doesn't mean I hate Kobe, doesn't mean I hate the Lakers. If you go into the front room of my house, it's all Lakers stuff. It's completely, and it's just ridiculous to think that but like I said, people who listen to talk shows, there's a certain group that are great listeners, and there's a certain group that's morons, and unfortunately the morons are, pretty prevalent.
Yeah. There he is, the one and only, the big nasty Joe McDonnell. And I was thinking about it. When I first met Joe, he was known just as Big Joe. He eventually became the big nasty a little bit later on. But I think that little clip right there gives you a nice insight to the one and only Joe McDonnell, whom we lost today. And it's with heavy hearts that we're on one hand, we're obviously we're going to acknowledge that, but at the same time, we wanted to spend a couple of hours here on the radio because I know not only would Joe love this, but I know he deserves this, and we're going to spend the next couple of hours celebrating the life of Joe McDonnell. And the good news is we're going to open it up to you as well if you want to participate. 877-710-ESPN, 877-710-ESPN. Joe was the phrase one of a kind is a cliche, but there really was nobody like Joe. He was one of a kind, and I know if you're a sports fan and a sports talk radio fan like I am, you know all about Big Joe, or if you didn't, you missed out. But when he was in his prime, when he was on top of his game, there was nobody better. And he was one of a kind, and he left us way too soon. Now, we found out the news this afternoon. Big Joe, at the age of 58, passed away at a hospital nearby here, and he's survived by his wife, Elizabeth. Joe, I have to say, on a personal level, Joe was, not only was I a fan of Joe, but he eventually became not only a friend to me and a coworker and a colleague, but he was a mentor, and as I said, most of all, he was just a really good friend, and we were very, very, very close for a long, long time. I confess, about 10 years ago or so, after I got married and I started having, my wife and I, we started having our kids, we grew apart a little bit, and then we started working at different radio stations. But for a long, long time, I'm fortunate to say that Joe was a good friend and a colleague, and I love him very much. I miss him. Today's been a really tough day, but I'm glad that we get to spend it together with you, and we get to celebrate the life of the Big Nasty. So with that said, we're going to hear from a number of people, but again, I want you to feel like you can chime in as well, because I know he touched so many people. I know he was a big part of so many lives, and so we want to open it up to you as well to be a part of it at 877-710-ESPN, 877-710-ESPN. I got to say it was a really, really classy move. The Lakers released a statement today. Lakers President Jeanie Buss and GM Mitch Kupchak released a statement. Jeanie said, quote, "For more than 35 years, Joe has been a regular at Laker games and press events. Known for his quick wit and strong opinions, Joe's love of and support of the Lakers has always been appreciated. Over all these years, our players, coaches, and staff have enjoyed working with and knowing Joe. He will be sorely missed." And then Mitch Kupchak added, quote, "Although Joe was opinionated and brutally honest in his coverage, I always felt he was knowledgeable and fair. He loved covering sports in our beloved city and had a presence at every major sporting event. As both a player and an executive, I enjoyed working with Joe since I arrived in town in 1981. I will miss seeing him at our games, practices, and press conferences." So that's from Lakers GM Mitch Kupchak. And also, I thought a very, very classy move by the Dodgers, and specifically Lon Rosen, the executive vice president of the Dodgers. The Dodgers are actually going to chip in and pay for part of the funeral arrangements for Big Joe. Not that they want the publicity. That's not what it was all about. They did it because Joe was a regular, and he was loved by and is loved by many, many people within the Dodgers organization, just like the Lakers organization, and with the Angels, too. Terry Smith, the voice of the Angels, is going to join us a little bit later on as well. Randy Cardoon, who worked with Big Joe, is going to jump on. I think our owner, Rosh Markazi. I remember we all worked together at another station back in the day. So we're going to be here for 2 hours. But again, this is it's not about me. It's not about a show. It's about Big Joe. All right, so we're going to do that tonight. 877-710-ESPN, 877-710-ESPN. I was thinking about I met Joe in the late, about 87, 88, and I remember, all right, well, we'll get to that in a minute, but I thought who better than to start off a tribute to Big Joe, the Big Nasty, would be his longtime partner, and a guy that, again, just can't say enough of, the one and only Doug Krikorian. Dougie, how are you?
It's kind of a dark day in my life. One of my, what can I say, 13 years with Joe, on and off, all the great memories. I was talking to Phil Cheney today, and we were just going over the memories and all the, as you know, Jeffrey, you were part of it. My gosh. All the great things that happened with Joe McDonnell and me, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, starting when I started working with him in 1992, and I remember a couple things. I guess I'm going to just go on and on, but I'll never forget this, Jeff. In I believe it was 93 in December, when we were at the height of the McDonald Douglas show at KMTC, we were together. We did the NFL Expo on a Saturday afternoon before the Dallas Cowboy Buffalo Bills game, and like 1,000 people came there. They were chanting McDonald Douglas, McDonald Douglas. That might be the highlight of the whole 13 years we were together. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, there was an incredible run, and just you guys. I mean, you guys were the kings for a while. I mean, you had a great
we
run.
Certainly were, and it was one of my hallowed sayings in life. Nothing stays the same, unfortunately, including our own lives. But it was a great time. I have nothing but great memories. And one thing about Joe, and I was talking to Larry Cunn, who of course is your friend. He lived his life the way he wanted to live it for so many years, as you know. Joe was opinionated, and he lived his life. He ate like he wanted to eat. He kept his friends, but he was the most loyal guy, as you know. I mean, the people he liked, the Mike Scioscias, the Jerry West, all the people he loved, you did not say anything bad about it. Jeff Biggs, anyone that he endorsed, he was. You would never change his opinion at all, as you know.
Yeah, he was. That loyalty was one of a kind, and
it was.
There was nobody like him at all, and he loved his teams. I mean, he loved. Yeah, he sometimes he had opinions, sometimes he ruffled feathers, but you know what? He told it like it is.
He certainly did. He never held back at all, and two teams we all know he loved the most were, of course, the Dodgers and the Lakers. I mean. Jeff, how many Dodger games did he miss from 1975? I was talking to Steve Brener. Barely any, unless he was on the radio from 75 until recently. And the Lakers, he went to every game, as you well know. He was Mr. There's no one in the history of LA sports that was closer and had more inside information on both on a lot of teams in LA. In fact, we used to kid each other. If we ever wrote a inside book, tell-it-all book, it'd be the greatest book in the history of LA sports, because we know so much that, of course, we never wrote.
I wish you would have.
No, but I would never do that. I would never betray the off-the-record asides that were given to both of us over the years. I wouldn't do that. But boy, if I ever did, boy, what a book it would be.
Yeah, he had that regular spot in the Dodger Stadium press box, and of course his seat behind the basket at the Forum,
right?
And of course down there at Staples Center. And Doug, I mean, look, you were a gifted reporter and columnist, right? I mean, you were right up there with anybody. But I mean, let's tell people and be honest. I mean, Joe was beloved by athletes. He had connections with athletes that nobody had. right?
Did he ever? From Dave Stewart to Pedro Guerrero to, I'm thinking of Mike Scioscia. I'm talking about all the guys he knew, Ronnie Say,
Kurt Gibson,
Davey Lopes, you could go on and on, a Magic. He just knew them all. Michael Cooper, Jerry West, obviously. I could go on. Shaquille, we had Shaquille, if you recall, Jeff. We had him in
that's right.
At the station when I was at ESPN, we had him. I don't think Shaquille ever did that in Los Angeles. Came down to the station, spent 2 hours with us. And, Joe had inside information with the Dodgers and the Lakers that no other reporter, I will say this unequivocally, that inside information, Joe McDonnell through the 70s and 80s, the mid-70s, throughout the 80s and 90s, and for the first 10 years of this century, no one had more inside information than Joe. Nobody.
No. So I want to a couple things I'd like to do with you, Doug. Number one, I want to. I know that we already have a ton of people on hold, and I know that they would love to be able to just to share with you or maybe connect with you a little bit. But also too, I want to. I would like just for some people to know. I'd love to hear the whole story of how McDonald Douglas came together and how you guys connected in that way.
Yeah, Joe and I, ironically, we would get in arguments in the forum, at the back of the forum when I would write my columns from Laker games, after I'd write my columns, I'd go back and Joe would be in the office. In those days, he did those radio bits.
Right.
What was it, Jeffrey? He'd send that radio.
For AP and EPI, right.
And we'd get in hellacious arguments about different players and this and that. I'd stick up for this guy, and he would stick up. By the way, before we go on, he was also very, very close to Wilt Chamberlain, as you know.
Yes.
Very close. And that's how we became friends. And then we start going on. I think it was like what was it? It was 88. Scott St. James used to have me on a lot, and Joe would go on. And a couple times Scott couldn't work the show, and we co-hosted it. And all of a sudden, the next thing you knew, KMPC became the first all sports talk station, Jeff, in Los Angeles, and I believe it was either April or May of 1992. And Joe, I hold the distinction of being fired before I ever worked the show. They hired me, and then they fired me to pair Todd Christensen, the
Top Cat,
tight end with Joe, and Joe hated that, and that lasted less than a month.
Well, it was that was it. I thought it was longer, but you're right. It was. Oh, that was brutal.
It was about a month. It wasn't longer than a month. And I remember I flew to London. I was so upset because that week I was going to start with Joe, and they went with the big star. He was a Pro Bowl tight end, this and that, and so it did not work with Joe, as you know. They despised each other. They ripped each other on the air. Within maybe it was 6 weeks, I start working with Joe, and we worked a 10 to 2 shift at KMPC with Jim Lampley doing the afternoon broadcast. 3, I believe it. Actually, we would work 10 to 3, which would be about 5 hours. That's what we did. And Lampley would do 3 to 6 or whatever. It's so long ago, I can't remember. But Lampley was doing the afternoons. And then Lampley started doing the mornings. Robert W. Morgan left the radio station, the KMPC. He did the mornings. We did the drive time. And we went from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, which was, what is that? That's 4 hours every day. Or 2 o'clock. No, I'm sorry, 2 to 7, 5 hours. We were doing 5 hours talk radio. And that's how it started. We clicked together. It was a good chemistry, Joe would goof on me and this and that. And I would be I was the foil for Joe, which I got a kick out of. And it was good. He was the radio guy, and he was the lead guy, obviously. And I always deferred to Joe, but, and it worked pretty well. It really did. We had a great relationship. I got mad a couple times, and, he'd get mad at me, but we never lasted longer than a day.
But you guys played off each other so well, and on top of it, you were both in your prime, so you were on the cutting edge and on the pulse of everything that was going on in the city. Yeah,
well, I covered at that time. I had gone to work for the Long Beach Press Telegram. I think in '92, I'd been there 3 years, but before that, I was at the Los Angeles Herald Examiner for 22 years, and I covered the Rams for 7 years. That was my full-time beat, aside from writing columns. And I covered all the big boxing at the Herald-Examiner throughout the 80s and the 90s at the Press-Telegram. And I covered the Lakers in 68, 69, 70, and 71. So I covered the Lakers. I was a full-time beat writer with Wilt and Jerry and, those teams, Elgin Baylor. So it was a good combination. With Joe, I thought we really clicked pretty well.
Doug, when did you happen to talk with Joe last?
Oh, boy. It's been too long, to be honest with you. It's probably been a couple months. We hadn't talked in recent months. To be honest with you, I went down the Good Samaritan last week with Kevin Lamp, who always played. You remember Kevin Lamp? He was the Muhammad Ali impersonator. He went down there, and it was he was basically unconscious when we went down there. Yeah. But we were always friends.
Yeah,
we always remain friends.
Absolutely. I know that. Doug, I'm going to ask you if you can hang on with us for 1 second.
Of course.
We're going to take a quick time out. We got a ton of people on hold that I know would love to speak to you. Also, if you don't mind, in a few minutes, we're going to get your old friend Lon Rosen, who's doing some busy things.
Lon Rosen.
Yeah,
Lon is Joe loved Lon Rosen. Yeah. I tell you, when Joe likes someone, he's the most loyal guy. Am I right, Jeffrey?
Absolutely.
You know that.
Absolutely.
He was loyal to me, and he was loyal. I mean, he always brought me along. I mean, I didn't know anything about radio, and he brought me in the radio, which allowed me to make a nice supplement. I'll be very honest with you. I made a hell of a lot more money off radio during those years that I did it twice as much in radio than I did as a newspaper man.
Ouch. Well, that's another topic for another time, but yeah.
Right.
You guys deserved it, though. That was good times. Missed that show very much. All right, quick time out. When we come back, we are going to continue our tribute show to Big Joe, the one and only Big Nasty, Big Joe McDonnell. We lost him today, but we will love him forever. We're going to talk about him tonight until 9 o'clock. Thanks for being with us. I'm Jeff Biggs. This is ESPN LA.
This is ESPN LA 710.
I didn't know how to respond.
And I said it very dramatically. Joe McDonnell, a big nasty, slept with Grandma. Remember, I said, my God, fans, what do you think of that? And the phones went wild. Don't you remember?
I'll tell you what, we were so, the one thing I'll say from the day we got together in 1991 at KMPC to the day we went off the air last summer, we were always ahead of everybody. You have people say, you're bragging, why aren't you on the air right now? I don't care what your reasons are, what your reasons are. We were different, we are different, and we took sports talk to the heights in this town that it's still never seen.
I agree with you, Joe. We were very unique.
Well, Dougie, that was from the McDonald Douglas podcast that you guys did a couple of years ago. Gosh, it was great to hear that.
Jeff, I remember one thing before we go to the calls or whatever. We were, before that Super Bowl, in 19, I believe it was the 94 Super Bowl, the 93 season, Buffalo and Dallas, we were at the Century Plaza that whole week.
Right.
And Mike and the Mad Dog, who were idols in New York at that time, and we were downstairs and all the radio guys were there. Everyone was around ours, and it really upset those two guys because, they're so big in New York. We were the dominant figure here. And they just couldn't get out of it. I remember Chris Russo came out and said, "Who are you guys?" He didn't even know who we were. It's funny.
And that was
Chris is a good guy. I like
Chris. And you got to remember too. I mean, that was the beginning, really, when you think about it. Aside from WFAN in New York, that was the beginning of sports talk radio, and KBC was the beginning here.
We did a simulcast with that station with what's her name? She's with the Yankees now.
Susan Walden.
Yeah, we did a simulcast with her. Yeah, about 2 hours with her, taking calls from New York listeners. It was good. I mean, for about 2 years there, unfortunately, our problems is always with management. As you well know, Jeffrey.
Hey, remember the big story from that Super Bowl week? Do you remember what it was?
Yes, I do. Yeah, the guy who was it? The linebacker.
Darryl Talley and Magic's bodyguard, right?
That's right, and we broke that story, and we talked about it all. We had the bodyguard on, and it was great. Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
And Michael Jackson at the halftime show. That's right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, a lot of people want to check in with you, Doug. So thank you. Hey,
no
thanks for taking this time. All right, let's go
no
to
problem, Jeffrey.
Start off in Steve in Huntington Beach. Hi, Steve. Steve Dew.
It's great talking to you. You sound fantastic, and hearing Doug was great too. I've seen him a few times, but I haven't talked to Joe in about, it's been several months, and I know that I had a stroke like 4 years ago, so things are a little bit different. But we talked to computers several times, but it'll never be the same without Joe. Joe has been a great guy. I really enjoyed him so much working with him, and just being around him is fantastic.
Yeah, Steve, absolutely, and thank you for sharing that. We got Dougie back right now, but I'm glad that you shared that, Steve. Doug,
he got cut off.
Yeah, you remember Steve Dew? He was just.
I love Steve Dew. Good guy. What did he say? I'm sorry, we were cut off.
Oh, just how Joe was one of a kind, and just what it meant to him to get to know him and work with him, and how he loved the two of you together.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Steve Dew. Let's go to Raul in Long Beach. Hi, Raul.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to talk to you, my friend. It's a sad day for all of us who worked at KMPC, and obviously with their Doug and being the studio engineer there in the middle of those two was a pleasure. I mean, Joe was one of a kind. I mean, as we've all said, he was extremely generous. I mean, and would buy us lunch. He would buy us all the time. You know, that's the way he would do it. And my greatest memory is, of course, being the Angels station back then. Him talking one time about the Angels in a negative sense, and what he said, I remember to this day, was that, I'm doing a really good job in the air when the owner of the station is standing at the window waving at me.
That's funny.
I remember Doug looking over behind him because where Doug sat, he was back to the back where the door was. And I will never forget the...
Raul, thank you. Raul, that is Raul Moreno. I didn't know that was that Raul, but you remember Raul. Doug.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Classic, and he's doing great, and I know how much he loved Joe.
Good guy.
You remember Bill Lovelace, right?
Of course. I saw Bill Lovelace as recently as 2 nights ago at Bill Cheney's in Long Beach. Yeah, of course.
Well, we've got Bill on the line right now.
Yep.
Bill.
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Doug.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, I got to share a couple of stories. I met Joe back in the early '90s at Phil Cheney's wonderful restaurant in Long Beach. We just hit it off, and he loved my two boys growing up. The boys are now in their 20s, but back when they were 8 and 10, they loved wrestling. And Doug probably remembers when they had Hulk Hogan in the studio at ESPN, huh?
Yeah, of course.
And I saw him a couple nights prior to that at Phil's, and he said, "Hey, Bill, take the kids out of school early. We're going to have Hulk in studio." And we hung out with Dave Joseph in the control room. He was working the board at the time, and everyone wanted to meet the Hulk. And we got to get the pictures with him and all that great stuff. And had the honor of DJing. I'm a mobile DJ, and I had the honor of DJing Joe's wedding, and Doug's for that matter. And but two great guys. It was always great listening to them in the afternoons. Another thing about Joe, our birthdays were 2 days apart, and no matter where I was, the last 20 years, I'd get a phone call or a text and wishing me a happy birthday. He's going to be missed a lot. Great guy.
You're right, Bill.
You're right, Bill. Thank you for that call. Thanks. Always good to hear your voice, Bill. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the loyalty, Doug, and that's just another great example.
The man was passionate in everything he did. And whether it was with his, lady friends, whether it was with his eating, whether it was his sports, he was and his friends. He was very passionate. And boy, if he liked you, as you well know, Jeff, he'll do anything for you. Yeah. Obviously, I would have never been in radio if it wasn't for Joe McDonnell. All those years I did, he's the one that did it. He and Scott St. James got me in originally, but I mean, Joe really, obviously I was with Joe all those years.
Yeah, no, he went to bat, and I mean, he was really the one that opened the door there at KMPC.
Certainly did. He opened the door for a lot of people. David Bassett, Jeff Biggs, Dave Joseph. How many people? About a lot of people. Yeah.
All right, we'll take one more here, and then we'll try to connect with Lon for a couple of moments.
Okay.
Greg in Ventura. Hi, Greg.
Hello, Jeff. Thank you so much for the tribute you're doing tonight. And Doug, I just want to tell you that I used to read your columns faithfully in the LA papers, Herald Examiner, and always appreciated your work. And you covered
thank you.
You covered the LA sports scene better than anybody I ever remember, other than maybe Jim Murray. But
and don't forget Alan Malamutt and Melvin Durslat.
All right. Well, you came in second. How about that?
Okay, that's good.
Doug, I had to have my career took me back east for about 15 years, from 1988 until 2003. So I didn't get in on the radio part of things with you and Joe until August of 2003, and I remember turning my radio on one afternoon, and I heard you and Joe going at it, and I paid attention, and I said, wait a minute, this guy is actually sounding horribly mean to Doug Krikorian, who I really totally respect. And you would always be respectful back to him, even if he blistered the hell out of you. And I guess I'm calling to say, I finally got an understanding that it wasn't, it was a shtick as opposed to...
No, it wasn't. We always used to, I used to have fun with it. And I'd say, oh, Joe, please, how could you say that about me or something like that?
And that was great. You always responded.
Scripted. Yeah, I know.
It was great the way you responded, but I also thought, he has a real hatred for Doug Krikorian. How could that be? So I guess that was just Joe. Doug, it never did get to that point, right?
No.
Tell me truthfully. No, he didn't hate you.
You mean where I hated him or not? No, never.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what.
I'll tell you a poignant thing about Joe, and I'm being honest here, and I've never said this on the air. He did get one time, Jeff, we were at Disneyland doing a show, and he ripped the hell out of me, really vicious. He was vicious that day. And I wasn't in a good mood because my late wife was, very, very sick at the time. And I said, I can't live with this anymore. I was taking care of her and doing the radio and and I went into the station next day. I said, Joe, if you continue to say, I'm going through hell right now. I can't take what you're saying. This is the only time I've ever did it. He started crying and he apologized, and that was Joe. And from that moment on, of course, she was fine. I felt bad. But I remember it happened on a Friday, and I stewed the whole weekend. And I came back, and I said, I was really mad. I said, Joe, if you continue that, I'm just going to walk off the air, which I would have never done. But he started crying. Joe started crying, and that's how, he was a good-hearted guy. Joe, he really was. That tough exterior, believe me, belied the fact that he was he was a very soft, emotional guy.
And I completely agree. And I think, like, looking back now from this position, Doug, I wish more people knew that. I wish more people knew that his bark was that was him, and those opinions were out there. But there was no need to take a lot of that stuff personal.
No, not at all. I never did. Just one time, like I said, that's the only time that I really got upset. Other than that, there was one time at the end of the show that I'd be mad or anything. No.
Yeah, and you guys had a great that was the beauty of the chemistry. Did. You could say that to each other, and you didn't hold back, but you knew you kept it in the context.
Yeah, we did. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Doug, and we'll miss Joe.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Greg, thank you for that call, and I'll tell you what, we'll take a quick time out. When we come back, we'll try to connect with Lon Rosen, okay? I don't want to keep you. Thank you for taking this time tonight, though, okay?
Okay. Well, do you want me on with Lon?
Yeah, sure. I
okay, that's fine.
Love to talk to you.
Okay, no problem.
Lon Rosen, Dodgers Executive VP, of course, worked with the Lakers and with Magic for a number of years. We'll connect with him in just a bit. We're going to keep this going until 9 o'clock. Our special tribute to the one and only Big Nasty, Joe McDonnell. Got his big break. I know he did a show on KFI on the weekends after KGIL. He had a big Sunday night show on KFI, which was really, at that time, there was nothing like it. I mean, it was really, really cutting edge, and it was from there that the doors opened, and he eventually worked at KMPC, the original 710 KMPC, which at that time, 710 was owned by Gene and Jackie Autry before they sold it in 94. But that was kind of the big break for Joe and Doug, and I got to ride in kind of on the end of the coattails when that got started. But yeah, that was kind of the beginning. And of course, the real big beginning for Joe was when he got together with Doug. McDonald Douglas literally took off like a jet. All right, back with more after this. I'm Jeff Biggs. This is ESPN LA.
This is ESPN LA 710.
And I got to tell you, I think that the week we spent up there prior to the Riddick-Bowe Holyfield fight, and then that 10th round itself, that may have been the most exciting week I've ever had in sports.
Oh, we had a lot of fun, didn't we? I think Johnny Ortiz was with us that week up there. And
well, that, of course, the one and only McDonald Douglas, and we are celebrating the life of the Big Nasty, Joe McDonnell. I'm Jeff Biggs. Always good to be with you. Wish the circumstances were a little bit better. It's been a tough day, and Joe was just a very good friend and a mentor to me. I love him and miss him, and just grateful that we're getting to celebrate his life for a little bit here tonight on this Friday night on the day that we lost him. Doug Krikorian is with me. Doug, you heard Joe talking about that week in Vegas, and it's a pleasure to have on the line right now another name from the past, although he's got a lot of things going on right now. The Dodgers Executive Vice President, Lon Rosen, who's kind enough to share a few minutes with us. Good evening, Lon.
Hey, Jeff. Hi, Doug. How you guys doing?
Hi, Lon. How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Tough day today, but Lon, I know if Joe knew we were going to do a show like this, I know he would want you on for sure. I know he thought the world of you. Of course, he loved
he
Magic.
Certainly did.
And he loved the Lakers and the Dodgers.
Well, Joe was a really special guy. You know, here he covered all these teams and all these athletes for so many years. And, you know, the reporters sometimes aren't the closest to the players, but in Joe's case, they really liked him. You know, when I spoke to Irvin today, he was absolutely heartbroken to hear about it. You know, Joe was one of Irvin's favorites. They spent a lot of time through the years. Irvin did many interviews with him. And, you know, the interesting about Joe was he loved these athletes. You know, he was always a little shy about it, but he would get a jersey and have them sign it, and Joe had quite a collection, but he was just such a special, unique guy, and boy, we're all going to miss him. And who's ever going to forget the McDonald Douglas show? It was great. Even when these guys would rip us, we still loved them.
We had a lot of fun, Lon. We really did. In fact, sometimes, Jeff, Lon would get mad at us. How could you say that, this and that? But it was all, Lon knew that half of it was, you know, said in jest, and we'd see each other and we'd hug each other. And you always had a good sense of humor, Lon, with that.
Well, it was some great times. And again, the last couple of months it was tough for Joe, but he would stay in contact and he'd call, and he was always trying to find, you know, something to do, and we would promise him when he got better, we'd have him come back and do some things at Dodger Stadium. And he came to a couple games last year, and it was hard for him to get around, but he still came out there, and you know, the players enjoyed seeing him. And you know, we're just going to miss him. You know that he had one chair he'd sit in the same space at Dodger Stadium in the press box. We all talked about it today. We're going to have to leave it open for a number of days here. But again, we're really going to miss Joe.
Yeah, that was. I sat in front there, Lon, as you remember. You know. And Joe was behind me, and how many years? My God, Steve Brener kept that open. I think Steve said today you start coming in 75. So, you know.
Joe was coming to the Dodger game since 1975, and I believe he started even before that when he was trying to become a reporter.
Yeah.
But he would hang out outside the press box at Dodger Stadium and try to get into the press box at the Laker games. And, you know, he became a fixture before he became a reporter. And, you know, him and his late friend Jim Pels, it was an interesting pair, those two.
Oh, great.
Started out together. And and again, they're sort of the fabric of local LA press.
Absolutely. I mean, Lon, you would agree
Joe
with me. You've been around a long time. Has anyone ever been closer to the Lakers and to the Dodgers than Joe McDonnell? You worked for both. I mean, who's closer?
No,
knew more stuff than Joe.
Nobody was. He knew players, he knew management. I'm going to tell you a quick little story. Back in the late it was probably early 80s. Sometimes before Laker games, early, a couple of us would go out and play basketball. And Joe was a little larger back then. And Joe would come out and play. And, we would run around him, and Joe would get a little upset with us. But every so often, Joe would lay a pick on someone and just knock him down. He was so proud of himself when he would knock us down. And then we'd let him shoot some free throws, and he was a pretty good free throw shooter. And we'd have
he was, yeah. He was.
Oh, we'd have to hear about his days playing football in high school and everything. But he loved his job, he loved his fans, and he just really, really adored the athletes. Every one of them just looked at Joe and said, "I'm going to help him out. I'm going to do things for him." And again, he was rough on him sometimes, but everyone still came back and loved Joe.
Of course. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Lon, thank you. I just I know it's a Friday night, but I know how much he loved you and Irvin as well, and the Lakers and the Dodgers. And thank you for sharing a few minutes with us, and really classy what you guys are doing for him.
Well, again, he's a very, very special guy, and appreciate the time. And Dougie,
yep,
we all
love you, Lonnie.
Back on the radio now.
I've known Lon since 1978 when he was just a young little kid, and I beat him a horse at my house one time. Never let him forget it.
That's awesome.
All right, guys, have a good evening. I'm here at Camelback watching the Dodgers. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay, Lon. Thank you. Lon. Thank you, Lon Rosen, Dodgers executive vice president. Now, real quickly, Doug. So, Lon started. He worked with the Lakers, and then he branched off and worked with Magic, right?
Right. He worked for the Lakers originally, and then he got involved. First he started in the PR department, and then he got involved somehow with Magic. He was Magic's agent for years.
Right.
He got him on the television. Remember the Magic Johnson show or Late at Night? And, Lon has been part of the L.A. sporting fabric for many years, and he's a good guy. I like Lonnie. Yeah.
Well, Dougie, I just... Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think so many stories about Joe, and when I first heard about it today, when I got out of the theater, I went and saw the Night Run with Leon Nilsson and Ed Harris, and I opened up my phone and saw all the messages and everything, and it just I knew this probably was going to happen today and everything, and I don't know. I'm in a state of shock, to be honest with you, Jeff. Joe was such an impact on my life. I think of those years, and I have nothing but glad memories of these years. And, the guys like you and all the guys, how much fun it was. It was fun. It was fun every day.
Yeah, some of without a doubt, the best days of my life.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean,
absolutely.
We had more fun, and when we had our best shows, I don't think anyone's ever topped some of the shows that we had. We had some great shows over across the years. We had some good shows, but the guys do a good job these days too.
Would you I'm just throwing this out there.
Yeah.
Do you have maybe a favorite McDonald Douglas show memory, or a favorite show, maybe favorite interview, favorite?
Well, there's so many. I mean, I remember we had Dr. Joyce Brothers on one evening, and that was different. We had Shoot Knight that promised that we were going to be in one of his movies. That was different. We had Andre Agassi and a limousine, Bob Halloran at the MGM, and those days it was Caesar's Palace. Put him on. He had just won the Wimbledon. At 35 years old, whatever he was, we had him. Let me see. We had so many. I mean, Riddick Bowe, 2 days after he knocked out or decisioned Evander Holyfield, he came in that Monday with Don King, and we had him on. We had every big fighter throughout the 90s on, from Sugar Ray Leonard to everybody. Everyone was on with us. So there wasn't one person. I'm trying to think what was the most memorable. My God, there's so many. We had Wolfman Jack on. We had, you name it, we had on. I'm trying to think who would really, Ali, of course. We had Ali on a lot. Ali, by the way, liked Joe a lot. He said, "Hey, big guy," he always says, "How you doing with the ladies?" And Joe used to say to him, "Well, I'm not doing as good as you are." This is early, And let me see who else we had. What other memorable? We had some memorable shows. We had a show after USC, and he's a friend of mine now. I'm embarrassed to say this, but John Robinson, for the whole 4 hours, we ripped USC for rehiring him. And Larry Stewart said it was a public persecution, The whole column, Larry Stewart, the icon of, I used to call him the icon of American journalism. He's the radio TV columnist for the Times. He said in his column, he says, how could the McDonald Douglas show embarrass itself, this and that. We had so many. I mean, I'm trying to think all the people that would call in. I'm trying to think of someone very famous. I mean, there were a lot of actors that used to call in all the time. And
Fred Dreyer, right?
Well, Fred Dreyer, of course. We had Fred all the time. God, it was, just name one. We had John Goodman on at the during that Super Bowl week at the Century Plaza. We had O.J. Simpson. We had John Goodman. We had all these restaurateurs from. That was the funny thing, Jeff. One of the funniest things is we had these famous restaurateurs from the West Side came over there. And we had, from Monty's, we had Larry Levine or Dennis or Michael Levine came there. And we had Joe Stellini, or Stellini's on Pico. And who was the other? There was a third guy that we had on. Jay Fiandella out in Santa Monica. We had 3 famous restaurateurs come on with us out there. It was unbelievable. People would come on, want to be on with us, and people just used to call us all the time. It was unbelievable. I think Kimmel used to call us once in a while. And Petros used to call us once in a while.
I remember that.
In a different voice. You remember the voice he used to call us when he was a young kid. But we had, I'm trying to think of the actors we had. We had so many different actors. Oh, gosh. We had a lot of people on, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and I'm going to really miss Joe. When I heard today, obviously, I'm all teared out for today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, Doug, hey, thank you so much.
I love Joe. And by the way, one other thing.
Yes.
He loved his wife, Elizabeth. She was a good lady, and she's, that was a great thing when they were together, and he was very happy. You went to his wedding, it was great out in the Sportsman Lodge out in Ventura Boulevard, and it was great. It's really nice.
Well, Doug, really nice of you to spend some time with us. I know it's been a tough
That's okay, Jeffrey. Anytime. And I'm proud of you, Jeff, the way your career has developed and your 3 kids. I knew you when you were a single guy, and you were always you were just a little kid. My God, I knew you when you were like 21 years old, I think. 20. How old were you when I first met you, Jeff?
Yeah, I want to say, 2021.
You could have been over 21, 22. You were just a young kid.
Wow.
And you've done very well for yourself, and congratulations. And it's a sad day, but, nothing but glad memories about Joe, that's for sure.
That's right. Very well said.
Okay.
Doug, love you, buddy. Thank you.
I love you too, Jeffrey. Okay. Bye-bye.
The one and only Doug Krikorian, of course, talking about Joe McDonnell, the Big Nasty. We're celebrating Joe McDonnell tonight, legendary sports. When you think of sports talk radio in L.A., you think of Big Joe. And I want to thank Dougie, his longtime partner on the McDonald Douglas show, spending some time and sharing some memories with us. Quick timeout when we come back. We're going to keep it going. We're going to be with you until 9 o'clock. I don't want to look, it's not about a show, so I'm not going to run down a list, but I know there are a lot of people that want to share some thoughts about Joe. So just stay tuned. We're not in a hurry. It's Friday night. We're going to keep it going, and a lot of love for Joe. This is for him. This is his show, and I'm glad that we're able to do this for him. So hang with us. Back after this on ESPN LA.
Any tips to aspiring journalists? Because you have a very long career. You've interviewed any name out there that you can mention. I know Magic, Kobe, anyone in between.
Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't let people tell you that you can't do it, because everybody will tell you can't do it, and you got to tell yourself you can. And if you can't, just keep plugging. If you do what you got to do, sometimes you're going to take jobs that don't pay anything. Sometimes you're going to take jobs and work for bleeps, and you just got to persevere and try to get where you're going. Hey, I've been doing this for 32 and a half years. I'm still not where I want to be.
The one and only, the big nasty, Joe McDonnell. We are celebrating his life tonight, and 2 hours doesn't even scratch the surface, but we wanted to just spend some time and acknowledge a true sports radio legend in the city and on these airwaves. And just the first hour flew by. Thank you again to Doug Krikorian for spending some time. And Doug, as he said, I mean, he was really in shock, and we're just kind of getting through this together. So we're going to open it up to you as well, 877-710-ESPN, 877-710-ESPN. But Joe, without a doubt, a true icon, and from one icon to another, when you're talking about radio, it is a pleasure to welcome on, I wish it was under better circumstances, but the one and only Tom Leykis, who's kind enough to share a few minutes with us. Tom, we've never met in person, but I've always been a huge fan, and I know Joe loved you to death. We talked about you a lot, and thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Jeff. What a tough day for everybody concerned. And you know, what's amazing about Joe is that he really straddled two worlds. You know, he had so many friends in the LA sports world. He had the phone number of just about anybody you could name. But he also had a lot of friends in the radio business as well. And those are really two separate worlds, if you think about it. So people miss him in the sports world, of course. Look at the tributes from the Lakers to Joe. I understand that the Dodgers are going to pay part of his funeral costs. I mean, he was well loved. And in the radio world, too, if you see online on Twitter and Facebook, all of the tributes from all of the people who he worked with in radio over the years. Let's face it, Joe worked at like 10 stations in L.A. alone. So he's worked with, alongside, or down the hall from just about everybody in the radio business in L.A. since the early 80s, late 70s, whenever he started at KGIL a long time ago. But it's hard to believe he's gone, because I'm standing right here where I had my Super Bowl party, and Joe is right here in my living room rooting for the Patriots, one of the few. And so I got to spend a lot of special time with Joe. Joe has, I have now evolved, and I'm doing a show as a live stream on the internet, and Joe has been on my show on many big LA sports days. We talked about the death of Jerry Buss. We talked about the Time Warner Cable and Dodger dispute, where people can't see the Dodgers. We did a couple of hours about that, and it was just a pleasure to be next to him again and doing some work with him. I can't believe he's gone.
And Tom Leykis, I remember too. Now things are a little bit different now, but you remember back in the early '90s when McDonald Douglas took off. That's also when you blew up. So the cool thing was, again, that was kind of unique at that time, that you were doing talk and they were doing sports, but you guys kind of had that connection, and that was different. That was cool.
Joe and I started at KFI at the same time.
Right.
When
Yeah,
the format
even before
changed
that. Right.
in July of 1988.
Right.
So that was when I arrived in L.A. to stay, and Joe is one of the first locals who I kind of latched onto, and Joe gave me access to a lot of connections. I told Tom Hovarth earlier about how when I was at KFI in the summer of 1988, Joe had the information that Wayne Gretzky was coming to the Kings days before anyone else had it. And he told me about it knowing I was a hockey fan. And I took that information and managed to get myself killer seats down in the second row at the Forum that I kept all the way until the Forum stopped being the home of the Kings.
Nice.
And that never would have happened without Joe. He always knew what was going on. He could always tell you what was coming, who was being traded here, who was being traded away. He could tell you things he would not write about necessarily. Who was impossible to deal with, who was a sweetheart, who was a hypocrite. The Joe McDonnell show was interesting, but sitting and talking to Joe and finding out what these people were really like, the people he had to deal with day in and day out, was even more interesting than his radio shows could be.
Yeah, and he just had such a big heart too, right? I mean, he was called the Big Nasty, but as you know, biggest heart of anybody you would meet.
Well, and it broke my heart to see that Joe was not on the radio every day. Joe and I spent a lot of hours recently. He's been in my studio in Burbank many times, and we were talking about trying to set up a digital platform for him, and going over all the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of doing something like that. He lit up when he sat in the studio and was able to call upon. Who else could sit in a chair and just start barking out phone numbers on the day Jerry Buss died? Suddenly you're talking to T.J. Simers or Michael Thompson or Mitch Kupchak, all these people coming out of the woodwork, that he was able to just go into his smartphone and just start picking out phone numbers. It's pretty amazing. And I don't know many people in the sports world who had the connections he had or had the inside knowledge that he had. People trusted him, and they told him everything.
Yeah. Well, he was, without a doubt, one of a kind. And, really going to miss him. Really going to miss him.
I was crazy about Joe. Like I say, it's kind of hard to believe he's gone. Because literally, I'm standing within a foot or two of where we were standing on Super Bowl Sunday. He was right here with me. So he and I spent a lot of time together, especially in the last year or two. And my hope was that he was going to find some way to come back with a digital version of himself, with a podcast or a live streaming show or what have you, because all this information, all these contacts, for him not to have a platform, that was kind of difficult for him to understand. And one thing that is true though is that I don't think he had any idea how many people loved him as much as they did. I really don't. I think he'd be touched. When I saw his name heading up the trend list on LA Twitter today, I was kind of blown away. I think he'd be blown away by it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, hey, I know it's a tough day, but really, really appreciate you taking some time to share that. I know people listening love Joe as much as we do, and I know they're blessed that they were able to hear you. So thank you.
Jeff, a pleasure. Thank you so much. And it is a tough day for all of us, but thanks for giving us this platform.
Okay, thank you, Tom, and hope to meet you down the road sometime. Okay.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Okay, Tom Leykis, the one and only Tom Leykis, talking about our good friend Joe McDonnell, who we lost way too soon today. Joe died today at the age of 58, and he was just a legend. Just to give you a little background of Joe, just in case you kind of wondered about his story, Joe got started. He got started early, and he actually worked. He was born in Pennsylvania, born in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. Grew up in the Valley. Went to Alamany High School. Loved his parents were classic. I mean, I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time around his family, and they were just classic, just absolutely classic. And they had, that's where he got his personality from, and he was one of a kind. But he went to LA Valley College for a little bit. Actually, got started in radio in 1975. He was only 19 and got started at a news talk station in the Valley called KGIL. Then eventually was able to get plugged in at KFI, did that weekend show. That's where he met Tom. And then eventually in 1992, 710 KMPC, they had Robert W. Morgan, and they had the big band music, but they also had Angel games and Rams games and Bruin games, and they had Jim Healy, the great Jim Healy show. And once in a while they had a sports show. It was called the KMPC Sports Line. Scott St. James hosted it. Joel Myers, remember Joel Myers? He hosted it. I think they did one with Lisa. What was her name? I'm drawing a blank on her name. But anyway, they kind of mixed in sports with the big man music and Robert W. Morgan. Then they won all sports, and then Joe got in. Started, as Doug pointed out, actually started at KMPC with former Raiders tight end, the late Todd Christensen. They hated each other, and I remember going in their studio during the show, and it was real. I mean, they hated each other, and they finally had to blow that up. And finally, Joe was able to work with Doug, and the rest is history, as they say, for McDonald Douglas. All right, a lot of people want to chime in. Also, guys, I got to give you some numbers as well. A lot of people a lot of people are reaching out, friends of Joe, people that we know that want to get in. So we'll do that as well. 877-710-ESPN, 877-710-ESPN. I want to go out to St. Petersburg, Florida, on line 3, guys. Rich Herrera is joining us, and Rich and I crossed paths. Now only diehards are going to get this, but after KMPC was sold in '94, okay, Joe, Doug, and I, and Rich, we worked at a station called KMAX, KMAX. What was it? 107.1. Is that right?
Yeah, that was it.
107.1 FM. It was sports talk radio. We worked there for about a year, and we had a boss about 4 or 5 months in. I won't mention his name. Went bankrupt. We all got stiffed for about a month's worth of pay, and then the station there kind of took over, and we kept that going for another 6 months or so, and then they were sold and went. I think they tried to copy K-Rock or something. But anyway, Joe and Doug did their show, and then at night, Rich Herrera did his show. He was from the Bay Area, came down here, did the show, and now he's moved on. He's done some outstanding work with the Rays. But, Rich, I know you love Joe. I know Joe thought the world of you, and that seems like just yesterday, doesn't it?
Yeah, and he thought the world of you, Jeff, so that's why, after trying not to get choked up, that's why tonight's so special. And if anybody was going to do this tonight, listening to you and Doug talk about Joe, was outstanding. Because I remember the first day I walked in, I had started radio up in Bakersfield, and I got my first big break, and I got to KMAX, and McDonald Douglas was on. And I remember listening to KMPC up in Bakersfield and going, I want to do that. So I was so excited. I walked in the very first day, and I walk around the corner, and in the bullpen is Joe, and his producer at the time is standing there, and Joe's taking the want ads, and he's standing about 2 feet away from me, throws it in his face, and he goes, this is what you're going to need if you don't start booking better guests for the show. And I am scared to death. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should go back over the grapevine back to Bakersfield where I belong. And he kind of barked at me, and he looked at me, and he tested me. And he scared the living heck out of me when I first got started. And I watched him from afar, and he showed me the work ethic. You know, you talked about he knew everybody and their brother, and I learned that from Joe wherever I'd been. Go talk to the owner. Go talk to everybody so you can actually get your own information instead of regurgitating out of the newspaper, which he was so good at.
Right.
And then as we went on, and I kind of earned his respect little by little, and we spent time in Las Vegas with the Flash, with Ortiz, and we go up for their fights. And I got to spend more and more time with them. And I always wanted to impress Joe so much. And a couple of years ago, we catch up with each other, and he says, you know, I was really hard on you when we started because we went from KMAX. Remember we went to High Top Hot Dog on a Stick?
That's right.
On K-Wink up in the valley. And he goes, you know what? You've worked really hard. He goes, I respect you. And for me, I've been doing this for almost 25 years. All I ever wanted was for Joe to get Joe's respect. And when I knew that, after all those years, I worked up in San Francisco and L.A., and I had national shows, Sirius XM. But the thing that meant the most to me in this business is when Joe McDonnell said he respected me, and it meant so much to me and so many other people that he tested, he showed us, and like you said, once he loved you, he loved you. I mean, he opened up Phil Trainees to me and let me hang out and be part of the Phil Trainees crew, which is some of the highlights I'll ever have. So let me tell you this real quick, Biggsy. I'm doing a show on KMOX last month, and we're talking about the Rams moving back. So I had Joe come on. So Joe comes on and tells everybody everything about the Rams and Kroenke and everything. And the last thing he said was, and, you know, that's the Rams. where they belong in Southern California. Drop the mics and walk off. All the people in St. Louis are like, they said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the big nasty Joe McDonnell, because he would say anything, anytime to anybody, and everybody respected him because you knew exactly who the big nasty was. So I'm sitting here in St. Petersburg, Florida, trying not to break down, but listening to everybody talk about Joe. Thank you. He's listening.
Amen,
for all of us that have jobs because of him.
Amen, brother. Rich, I love you, man. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, okay? All right, let's keep it going. Another guy that I know Joe loved to death, and I can say firsthand just their heated exchanges off mic at sporting events were worth the price. They were better than the games that we would cover themselves. The one and only Steve Futterman on Line 6, guys. Steve, I know how much Joe loved you, and those were. I'm kind of in shock, my man, but thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's a tough day, Jeff. I actually learned about this on Facebook. I was driving to Venice High to cover that story today, and a lot of tears today. It's very, very tough. You cover stories that are very sad in my profession, but rarely does it hit you. But it's been a very tough day, and we're all going to miss Joe. I'm enjoying the tributes. I'm glad he had an impact like we're hearing tonight from Rich before. I didn't hear Doug earlier, but it was a remarkable person, one of a kind. I know that's a cliche. There are people who are one of a kind, and Joe was one of them. He had all these different types of adjectives that would work with him: outrageous, bombastic, crazy at times, stubborn at times. But what a great guy! Wonderful heart, big heart, and we're all going to miss him. He was part of the sports scene for so many years. I was so touched when I actually broke up when I was reading. Sorry about that, Jeff.
That's okay. That's all right. That's all right.
When the Lakers actually put a release out, that is remarkable. A team putting a release out. Joe wasn't their play-by-play guy. He wasn't their color guy. He wasn't employed by the team. But the Lakers put a release out praising Joe, comments from Jeanie Buss, Mitch Kupchak. It's just been very, very touching to see the reaction. And it's a tough day, like I said, for us who really cared about Joe. And he was a good friend.
Yeah, he was, Steve. And like I said, I know he thought the world of you. I'm curious because I knew that you guys had been friends for a long time when I first met you. When did you first meet Joe? When did you guys first connect?
Boy, it's almost like, I know there was a period I didn't know Joe. When Joe first emerged, I guess it's like the early 70s.
Wow.
I'm guessing that's when I first met Joe. I know by the mid to late 70s, I certainly was a friend of his because the Dodgers triumphs or in the National League in 77, 78. I know we were friends by then. I don't know the specific start date, but it's a long time. And listen, we saw Joe through his trials and tribulations. The weight was always an issue. I think all of us who were close to Joe, there were times we worried when we would think to ourselves, will Joe die young? And listen, there were times I feared that his weight would get to him at a much younger age. But he did that remarkable weight loss. I guess he lost around 400 pounds. Right. And for him, it was a life or death thing. He knew he had to lose the weight. And it's just so sad. But, I knew him a long time, many great moments. We agreed on many teams that we liked and many teams we didn't like. Let's focus on the ones we agreed on. Big Laker fan, big Celtic hater. He was the only person I think I know who seemed to dislike the Celtics as much as I did. And so that was always a nice thing that, you had these passions in common. And he had opinions about everything, as do I. We agreed on almost, a great deal of things. But there'd be a few times we would disagree, but it was just a great guy. And I always enjoyed, because he came to events, Jeff, in later years, less times than he would in the past. You used to see him at every event. But I would always be touched, and just moved. I would see him at a Dodger game, just have a chance to talk to Joe. It just made the evening for me to be able to talk to Joe for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. Very well said. Well, Steve, thank you. I know how much you loved him, and thank you for sharing that with us tonight.
Hey, I'm glad you're having this tribute to him tonight, Jeff. Take care.
Me too. All right, thank you. Steve Futterman, who's a just worldwide reporter right now, but he's been around a long time as well. Before he was here for a lot of years, he still lives here, but he's all around the country, covers every big news event around the world. But he and Joe were very close, and you hear it, and that's the kind of impact that Joe had. I mean, Joe touched a lot of people, and I'm at times, I think you can kind of pick this up, I'm not always the most outgoing or boisterous person. I observe a lot, and I I don't really open up as much as I do at certain times if I don't feel comfortable around people. But I had a chance to kind of stand to the side and watch Joe for really all of my formative years growing up in this business, and was nobody like him, and there will never be anybody like him. Doug talked about it. Lon Rosen talked about it. Athletes loved him. Teams loved. He was more connected than anybody, and he just, he didn't try. That's the thing. He wasn't trying to. People just loved him. They just loved him. He didn't try. He wasn't trying to be phony. He wasn't trying to get anything. There weren't motives. He wasn't trying to angle for a job or go behind people's back or any of that stuff. He was just Big Joe, and people loved him. Players loved him. I've got a lot more stories. We've got some people on hold that want to chime in as well. We're going to do that when we come back. 877-710-ESPN, 877-710-ESPN. We're celebrating the life of the one and only Joe McDonnell on ESPN LA.
This is ESPN LA 710.
How did you get started in radio?
As an intern, I just wanted to get out of class in college, so my sophomore year, I found out about an internship at a radio station, and I went and took it, got one class off, and the first day I went there was September 18th, 1975, and people who are history buffs will recognize that day as the day Patty Hearst was arrested, and I fell in love with it. My internship started at 5 o'clock that morning. I didn't go home till 11 o'clock that night, and that was it for me. I fell in love with radio.
And Los Angeles got to fall in love with the Big Nasty, Joe McDonnell. Welcome back to our special tribute to Joe McDonnell here on ESPN LA. I'm Jeff Biggs. We're celebrating the life of Joe for a little bit longer. Wish we had more time, but we're grateful that we're able to share it with you. Joe touched so many lives, so many sports talk radio fans here in LA, and the least we could do is spend a little time remembering and talking about him with the news today that we lost him way too early at the age of 58. The sound tonight, by the way, you've heard is we want to thank the folks at Stitcher for we found those clips from Big Joe, so we're glad that we've been able to share them with you. Thank you to Stitcher for providing those to us. We had Doug Krikorian on last hour, Joe's longtime partner of the McDonald Douglas show, and joining us right now is another guy that was in the mix with us back in the day as a producer and one of the assistant program director. I mean, everything. He did it all at the station, and he was there from day one. Kretchmar joins us now. Kurt, how are you, my friend? It's I wish we were talking under better circumstances, but nice to have you on.
Absolutely, Jeff. It's so neat to hear the stories, and really it's celebrating his life. And I know he would have been so thrilled and proud to see all the Facebook messages, because I was fortunate enough, lucky to find it earlier today, and I looked at Facebook, and here it comes, and just the love from listeners and people I used to work with, and on Twitter, and it's just exploding, and I'm not surprised, because he touched so many people, and he did so much for my career, and was a mentor, and helped me get 3 different jobs, and always would make a phone call, and it's sad that it happened, but we need to celebrate and remember that there are so many good memories. I know there's not a lot of time. I wanted to share a couple stories with you,
please,
if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
A couple of my favorites. We were working together pre-KMPC days of the old Extra Sports 690, and I was producing for Steve Hartman up in Los Angeles. Steve goes on vacation. Joe fills in for him. Well, the producer, Chris Visser, had a way of teasing Steve by playing the USC fight song in the background when Steve would talk about the Bruins, kind of like mocking him.
Right.
So Joe was set to fill in for Steve Hartman for the entire week. And I knew that if Chris Visser did that to Joe, he might kill him. So I drove down to San Diego on the weekend, bulked every cart with every fight song in the rack, and put the UCLA fight song on every cart. And I kind of turned the tables on him, and Joe was thrilled and really, really laughed at that and was glad that I had done that and backed me up when the producer tried to get me fired for it. Another quick story, I'm interning for the Dodgers the 89 season, and the Lakers had won the World Championship, and they put out those Wheaties boxes, the commemorative ones.
Right.
Joe had a whole bunch of the Lakers that were on the James Worthy autographed it. But as you know, Joe and Kareem hated each other. And Joe respected Kareem, but they just hated each other. And so Joe said, can you go downstairs, it was Hollywood Stars night, and have Kareem sign it? So I go down there, Kareem's sitting on the bench prior to the Hollywood Stars game, and Kareem says, yeah, I'll sign it, but I'm hungry. Go buy me dinner. Well, at that time, I'm not making any money. I don't have any cash on me, so I have to go all the way up to the press box and say, Joe, you got to buy Kareem dinner. And he's swearing at him and saying something. And reluctantly gave me money, and I went and waited in line and got hot dogs and went down and fed Kareem, and then Joe got his Wheaties box signed by Kareem.
That's outstanding.
And then once we worked together at KMP, I worked with him at Extra Sports 690, KFI, and then he got me over at KMPC.
Right.
And he kind of feuded with Bill Ward, and Bill Ward would always kind of hassle him, and it was kind of unfair. So you remember there was those two entrances. There was a main entrance, or you'd walk in and you'd go past Bill Ward's office, the general manager.
Right in the front.
Well, they had that Enberg entrance on the absolute other side of the building. You could go, and Joe would pull up on the side street. I would open up the Enberg entrance and let him into the studio, and he'd be able to get into the studio 3 minutes before the show, and he would never walk past Bill Ward's office, and Bill couldn't call him in and talk to him and hassle him. And so Bill Ward would come in, and we'd already started the show, and Bill would walk by and say, well, how'd he get in here? And Bill didn't realize it for like a year that I would let him in, and we'd have an intern go park Joe's car. And then it would work the same way at the end of the show, where Joe would leave right after the show, and Bill would say, I want to talk, have him come by and see me after the show. And Joe said, I'm not doing that. He needs to go to a Dodger game or take off there. And then he'd avoid management that way. But there were so many. I mean, my favorite McDonald Douglas moment was they're feuding with John Robinson. And there's a press conference, and they asked John Robinson, when he was coach of the Rams, when are you going to go? Are you going to talk about this on the McDonald Douglas show? And Robinson says, when it snows in Los Angeles, I'll come on the McDonald Douglas show. Well, a couple weeks later, it got really cold, and it actually started to snow in, like, Antelope Valley, and so they made a whole bit calling around and having the traffic reporters, Richard Turnage, call in.
That's right.
Inside of snow, and, it's snowing here in Los Angeles. Is Robo-Coach going to come on?
Robo-Coach.
And it just being part of that and having Jim Healy around there, and really the dynamics. How many times are you going to have a high-powered, driven, highly rated afternoon show that stops at 5:30? Another show comes on, and then they're taking a break, and then they come back on at 6 o'clock. And it was awesome, and everybody loved it. And it's just something that you won't see replicated again.
And we'll never see another Big Joe either, for sure. Kurt, thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe.
Kurt Kretchmar, very well said. And I remember that. That's right. We used to take the Jim Healy break at 5:30 at the original 710 KMPC. Another one of Joe's co-workers, co-worker of mine as well. And I know that he had some great stories with Big Joe. Dave Denholm is with us right now. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Bigsy. How are you, man? Tough day. Really appreciate you doing what you're doing right now. And, obviously, remembering Joe in a great way this evening. So thank you for that.
Yeah, he deserved it.
Just wanted to share a few thoughts on Joe and some stories. You know, I came into town as a young punk in the late 90s, 16, 17 years ago, and actually, quote-unquote, replaced Joe at Extra Sports 1150. Nobody could replace Joe, though, and I learned that very fast. And it was just amazing how I took so much heat from people and really members of the media for all the right reasons, because they just loved Joe, and I totally understood that. But when I first met Joe the first time, I was like shaking in my shoes, thinking, oh no, I hear all these stories about the big nasty and all this. And the very first time I met him was at a ball game. We were in the press box, and I was expecting the worst potentially, like, how's he going to treat, how are we going to get along or what? He was the greatest guy. Just immediately came up to me and just said, hey, good luck, wish me well, welcome me, and, nothing but the best. And I couldn't believe it, quite frankly. It was just such a standout guy that way. And then, a couple years later ends up hiring me at ESPN radio. And,
right.
Kind of just always was so nice, but I didn't expect that, and just an amazing guy that way, and really just owe him so much, Big Z. And always was a friend after that, after first meeting him. We always had great conversations. The guy could talk about so many things. Didn't agree with him on a whole lot of stuff, to be perfectly honest with you, and he would tell you that. But we really had some great times, and just, if you know him, and I know so many people do and loved him, maybe the most ridiculous nickname of all time, really, once you got to know him, the Big Nasty. It fit on the air, but it just was just flat out not true, and it's just a great guy, bottom line. So just certainly will be sorely missed, and just a tough day all around. It's been great to hear other people talk about him for this show, though. Just can't get enough of it, honestly, the memories. So really appreciate you doing it.
All right, Dave. Thank you. Thanks for getting in, my man. Okay, God bless you. All right, Dave Denholm. We're talking about the big nasty, Joe McDonnell. We are celebrating his life as best we can here on this Friday night, and we're glad that you're with us here on ESPN LA. If you listen to Joe, of course, you knew that you had to kind of keep track of everything, and one guy who has done that for decades now via the written word in the Daily News every Friday in the Daily News media column, very, very well connected and always on top, and always had his hand on the pulse of what was going on with Joe and Doug and Sports Talk Radio and everything that was going on here in L.A., is Tom Hovarth, who's kind enough to join us now as well. And Tom, your relationship with Joe was great. I know for a fact, because we talked about it in his car. I know how much he thought of you and just how much your not just things that you would write, but just your friendship and support really did mean a lot to him.
Well, I'm going to have to come up with a special Sunday column now, and it's something I never thought I'd have to write. It's still one of those things you don't believe you have to write. And the last couple of hours have been a blur, just trying to collect people to talk about Joe, just like you're doing in the studio right now. And I think this is like the greatest tribute you can give to him is talking about him on the radio, which is what he loved, especially being at the first 710 all sports station and then being at another KSPN, and he just loved radio, and the thing I was interested in is I would come out with my rankings every year about the top 10 and the bottom 5 of sports talk show hosts, and I can't tell you how many times Joe would just be a natural number one guy. It just was easy to put him there, and occasionally somebody would knock him off, but it was only because Joe had been fired from a station and it was in between jobs.
Right.
So he could never consistently hold the number one spot. And I was just looking at all the stuff I'd written about him. I probably wrote about Joe more than anybody in sports talk radio for the last 20, 25 years, just because of the impact he had. And I'm just looking at these lists of stories that I've done on him, and I just wish I was there for him at the end to sort of help him, kind of just be more supportive as a friend with things he was going through. And the last time I got to talk to him was he was driving to Tom Leykis' party in Arizona and wanted to Super Bowl party, and I wanted to go with him. He says, "No, we'll go next year instead." So it's not going to happen, but I'm still thinking about it. So it's one of those days you knew what happened, but I'm just glad I was able to write about Big Joe. I mean, guys like Big Joe provide plenty of stories for me and everybody in the print media, Bob Kaiser over the years, and Larry Stewart, and everybody who's written a media column in L.A. has always could thank Joe McDonnell for providing plenty of fodder.
Yeah, and I got to say, Tom, just echoing with what you just said, I just wish we could have shown him a little more love here at the end, like you said. Like I said earlier, I wish he could see how much he was really loved. I wish he knew really what an impact and what a difference that he made.
Well, he was always grinding. He was never giving up. He knew the medium was changing, and he wanted to be part of it. And he got into podcasts, and he'd bring Doug back, and they got a podcast going. And he was always looking at, what's the next way I can keep going. And his health just did not cooperate with him, and that was the problem that was always going to plague him. But it's what made him fight. I mean, he just fought through so many things, and that was kind of fun to see, and it kind of be there as a sounding board for him when he needed, to go to trainees and just let off some steam. And so I'm just glad you're having this show, and I'm glad I was able to contribute to it. And I don't want to stay on long because I know a lot of people want to talk, but thanks for giving me the opportunity.
All right, Tom. Thank you.
You got it, Jeff.
Tom Hovarth of the Daily News. Yeah, he was definitely one thing you can say about Joe. And look, there were people that didn't like him, not because they knew him, but maybe they didn't agree with his opinions. Because Joe, when Joe had an opinion, or when he took a stand on something, that's how he felt. And sometimes people would kind of take it to another level. But even if you disagreed with him, or you didn't feel the same way that he did, or if you didn't like it, maybe you weren't a fan, maybe you didn't care for that style or his style, which was telling it like it is. He never quit, never stopped, and as Tom pointed out, the physical issues the last few years were rough for him, but he still persevered. We were talking about it with Doug earlier. I mean, he was still getting out there, still going to games, and still, I mean, he was fully confident. We heard part of the podcast that he did a couple of years ago with Doug. I mean, he was fully anticipating that at some point the door would open again, and he and Doug would be doing McDonald Douglas again. So that's who Joe was. I mean, he had a big heart, but he was tougher than anybody, and there's just nobody was like him. Nobody touched people, athletes, management team. Nobody touched people the way that he did. He was truly one of a kind. All right, quick timeout. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up with our final segment. This time has flown by. There's a lot of people on hold, and I just want to say, if I can't get to everybody, please understand. I'm not trying to not put you on. We've just had a lot of people that want to be a part of it, and we only have a couple of hours, but we're gonna continue celebrating. And again, I'm just glad that we've been able to do this tonight. Thank you for being with us. We'll finish things up after this. We're celebrating Joe McDonnell on ESPN LA.
This is ESPN LA 710.
I am not the easiest person to get along with when I feel good, and imagine when I'm feeling as lousy as that. And, you saw me, then, I came in here 3 weeks after my first couple of surgeries. We took my father-in-law, Bill Turner, out for Father's Day, and you walked in here, and I thought you were going to die looking at me.
The one and only, the big nasty, Joe McDonnell. We are celebrating his life tonight here on ESPN LA. I'm Jeff Biggs. Great to be with you, at least to celebrate with you. I wish the circumstances were a little bit better, but it's been, I think, therapeutic for me just to connect with all of you. We've had so many great guests, and I've said this on the record. I've said this in interviews. The two people that have helped me the most in my career, aside from God, were Big Joe and our next guest, Randy Cardoon, who, of course, you hear all the time on KMAX 1070. And Randy, I know you and Joe go way back. You guys actually crossed paths back in the 70s. Is that right?
Yeah, we were both 5 years old at the time.
Yeah.
No, but I came in as an intern. I was at Cal Poly SLO, and I had
grabbed an internship, and most of everybody had an internship up in that area. And I wanted to be back in L.A. because I grew up here. I grew up a Valley kid. Went to school in Woodland Hills, and I went to KGIL. And at the time, they had Sweet Dick Whittington, and they had all sorts of talent there. And among them, Joe Butita was there. And when I went there to join Dick Spangler in the newsroom because I wanted to do sports, I met Joe Butita, and he said, "Well, here's a guy that helped us," and he goes to all the Dodger games, and it was Joe McDonnell. And I met him, and what amazed me was just the fact that this guy had the best job in the world. I mean, he would go cover Dodger games in the locker room. He would go, and I'd say, "Wow, do you make any money doing that?" He says, "Not necessarily, but you know something? I get to go in the locker room, and someday I'm going to do this, this, and this." And this was a kid with a vision, and he enjoyed what he was doing. You could tell he really enjoyed what he was doing. And then, of course, I went on and came back to L.A. about 10, 15 years later, and Joe was still plugging away. And not only that, he was on the radio. He was doing talk shows that were fun to listen to, and you really were afraid to turn it off because you thought you'd be missing something. And I got a chance to reconnect with him, and eventually he even worked with us at KMAX. And, I was listening to some of the guys you've had on the show, and we all kind of knew this was coming because we knew Joe had some health issues. We hoped it'd be later than sooner, but it's celebrating a guy with that kind of drive and a guy who meant so much. I mean, an icon in this city when it comes to sportscasters. Thank you, Jeff, for putting that together.
All right, Randy. Well, thank you, and again, thank you for what you did. I know you paid tribute to Joe today during your broadcast, so thank you for that. And as I always say, thank you for all that I can't put into words all the great things you did for me when I was getting started. And again, Jeff, I'll tell you something. Just a real quick aside for your listeners. I mean, Jeff Biggs came to me when we were working at Little 670 K-Wing. And he was a kid out of Valley College, and he wanted a chance. And I gave him a chance. And he could have done something with it. He could have done nothing with it. Well, look at him now. I mean, he has taken that opportunity. He has run with that opportunity. And kudos to you, my friend, because, you have made the best out of your situation. And much success to you. All right, Randy. Thank you, my friend. And congrats on the engagement as well. Really happy for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Randy Cardoon from KMAX, kind enough to share his thoughts on Big Joe, and they crossed paths years ago. But again, I think as Randy would attest, I mean, Joe had that vision, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And I mean, he loved the players. Like when I was first getting started, Joe would have me go up to guys that they wouldn't, like, for example, Kirk Gibson. He wouldn't talk to anybody. I mean, he hated the media, but Joe would have me take my recorder up to Kirk Gibson, and I'd say, "Hey, Kirk, Joe McDonnell wanted me to give you a message," and I would say something to Kirk that I can't repeat on the air, and then Kirk would say a message back to Joe in my recorder, and I would come back and play the recorder. Thank goodness we don't have those tapes, because I would be out of a job. But that's the kind of relationship that he had. But he loved doing a show. That's what he really liked to do. Chuck Hayes pointed out, Chuck Hayes, a longtime vet as well, pointed out that, hey, Big Joe, too, also really changed the industry because he made a lot of money for radio. I mean, his show and the whole concept of a sports talk afternoon drive show here in L.A., again, KMPC in 92, that was the beginning. That was the debut. And really, it was McDonald Douglas. They were really the first ones to kind of get that whole ball rolling, where all of a sudden sports talk radio and hosting shows became a profitable and lucrative business. So again, another pioneer in that sense. One of Joe's favorites, without a doubt, well, a couple of them with the Angels. Loves Tim Mead, loves Eric Kay, who both work with the Angels. Absolutely loved Mike Scioscia, one of his absolute all-time favorites, and also was a huge Terry Smith fan, who is the voice of the Angels. Terry, one of my favorites as well. And Terry, I know you're in Arizona. thank you for spending a few minutes tonight. I know it's a game day and you're busy out there, but I know how much Joe loved you, and I know you guys thought the world of him as well.
Yeah, Bigsy, I got to tell you, I've had the show on here in spring training in Arizona, and this tribute has just been wonderful. So kudos to you and everyone who's participated. I loved hearing Doug Krikorian on at the beginning of the show. I wish I could hear Doug all night long talk about Joe, and I know what dear friends those two were. But yeah, I'm going to miss Joe immensely. He became a very good friend. I can remember when I came to SoCal in 2002. I had several people mention to me, you alluded to Mike Scioscia, Rex Hudler, Rory Marcus, obviously my late partner who I loved dearly, and other people in the Angels organization, and all of them to the last man said, hey, there's a guy that you need to get to know now that you're new here in the whole sports scene in Southern California, and that's Joe McDonnell. So I made it my point to get to know Joe. We hit it off, I think, right away. We were both from the Philadelphia area. Right. You know, you talked about Joe, and Joe was actually born in the same hospital as Mike Scioscia. Wow. And those two, to this day, have remained great friends. So he's going to be missed. You know, he's going to be missed dearly. He always had an open door to our Angel radio booth. He always took advantage of it, and I'm glad he did. And you know, I'm just going to miss not seeing him at the ballpark anymore. I really am. Yeah, me too. Well, Terry, I know how much he thought of you, how much he thought of Mike, and I'm just glad that you took some time and just let everybody know that we appreciate it. I know it's just great to see all the love coming from everywhere, because Joe deserved it. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Joe was more than just sports. He was into a lot of things. He was very opinionated as far as politics, and, you know, he loved wrestling. I know you talked about that earlier, and he was a huge JFK assassination buff, and I am too, and we would always talk about that, and he would send me links to websites to look at and tell me about books to read and things like that. So, you know, just not being able to call him or text him or email him or even see him, most importantly, that's going to be a void in my life, because he was great to me, and I'm going to miss him immensely. All right. Terry, thank you, my friend. Good to hear your voice, and thank you for spending a few minutes with us. Really appreciate it. You got it, Bigsy. Thanks for having me on. You got it. Terry Smith, the voice of the Angels, talking about Big Joe, and he loved Mike, loved Terry, loved DC, Darren Chan, the whole crew down there. I mean, he really, really enjoyed getting back into that mix. And he was doing a lot with the Angels of late, even though he had, of course, always had the ties with the Lakers and the Dodgers. But he was spending a lot more time with the Angels of late, and I know that was near and dear to him. Well, I thought the only fitting way to wrap up this tribute to Joe McDonnell, my dear friend, and the guy that I just can't put into words what he meant to me as a friend and a mentor when I was just a young punk. I remember the first time I saw Joe at a sporting event. It was actually through Randy Cardoon at 670. Randy was doing the mornings, and he couldn't get out to games very often because he had to get up bright and early in the morning to do the morning show at 6:70 a.m., which was also at Hot Dog and a Stick. So Randy was kind enough to get me press passes to go out to these games, and that's where I met Joe. And I remember the first time I met him, I was a little intimidated, but Joe was great to me and took me under his wings, taught me about the business. I remember one time we were talking about I'd done a really good interview with somebody, or something happened, and I remember we were in his car, driving in his car by the Forum, and he said, hey, you know what, Jeff? You can have the best interview, you can have the best show, you can have the best sports update, but at the end of the day, you got to do it again tomorrow. No matter how great of a day you have in radio, it doesn't matter if you don't do it again the next day. And that's something Joe said to me that I've never, ever forgotten, and that's why I try to keep the bar so high. But he was one of a kind. I'm not even worthy of being mentioned in the same breath with him, but he was one of a kind. So I wanted to wrap up the show with a very special guest, and that would be Joe's wife, Elizabeth McDonnell, who's kind enough to
to come on with us right now. Elizabeth, just on behalf of all of us, on behalf of L.A. and sports radio and sports fans, we're hurting for you. We love you, but we thank you for coming on. And I know you got to be touched by what you're saying. The love for Joe has just been, and you know how he touched everybody.
I do. Thank you so much for letting me come on, and I've been listening to a lot of really kind words, and I feel surrounded by love, and I know that Joe would too. And I just really appreciate what you and your crew and ESPN has done tonight. It's been really special. I've been getting a lot of wonderful comments, and you are getting a lot of compliments, Big Z, so I think that it's just a pretty special night.
Well, you know that one of the fixtures of Joe's show was on, and you reminded me of it, and I forgot it. It was one of my favorite bits, though. One of my favorite bits. I actually look forward to it at the end of shows. At the end of his show on Friday nights, it was, "Who do you want to kick out of L.A.?" Right?
He was so proud of that, and he would get the biggest kick out of all of the voting and all of the listener participation. And if I remember correctly, it started off as kind of a whim and just something to do. And it actually kind of took over Friday night, and everybody would talk about it, and there would be guesses as to who was going to get kicked out, and he always loved it when it was him.
And it really did blow up. It was, like you said, it was kind of this thing, let's kind of see how it works, and then it became, it was one of the highlights of the week.
Yes, very much so. So I'm going to try and keep this together when I do this, but if I can't, will you please pick up the pieces for me?
You got it. You got it.
I would like to kick Joe McDonnell out of L.A. Please.
Okay. Elizabeth, we love you. We love Joe, and we know that he's out of L.A. because he's in a better place, and we're just so grateful and thankful for how he touched all of our lives. And thank you for coming on tonight. We're thinking of you. We're praying for you, and you just know how much he was loved.
Thank you, guys. Thank you to everybody who came on tonight, and thank you guys for putting it on. Thank you to the management. That just means the world to me.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. You deserve it, Elizabeth. And we just want to sign off by saying, Joe McDonnell, we can't really put into words what he meant to all of us, but I want to say thank you to everybody that took a few moments to share in. But most of all, thank you to you for listening. I know how much and just how many lives he touched, how many fans that he had, and I hope that you were able to connect and maybe have your own memories, maybe some shows that you remembered, things that you thought of during this program. But again, God bless Elizabeth and the rest of the McDonnell family through this, what's going to be a tough weekend. But I'm glad that they were able to be with us tonight. And again, thank you for spending a couple of hours with us. I want to say thank you for our crew here, for Mike Thompson, our program director here at ESPN LA. I knew that I was going to be doing my ESPN LA Rewind show, but I was talking with Frank that maybe we could do some kind of tribute at the end. It was actually Mike Thompson that brought up the idea. Let's do a tribute to Big Joe. They had worked together back in the day, and so props to Mike for the idea and for allowing us to do this. And again, there was nobody like Joe. He was one of a kind. He touched so many people, and there was just nobody like him. I mean, he had relationships with athletes and fans and management, and nobody touched people. Nobody connected with people the way that Big Joe did. He was just truly one of a kind, and I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss him a lot, and I can't say thank you. I wish I could articulate just how much of a friend he was to me when I was a young punk. Just all the things that he did for me. Just people don't do that anymore. People don't do that, but he did. We spent almost every single night together going to games, and just for over a decade, just hanging out and spending time at the Forum after games. And on that note, just want to say, Joe, that I love you, and we're going to miss you. And thank you for all that you did to touch all of our lives. Thank you for listening tonight. Have a blessed weekend. Thank you for listening. I'm Jeff Biggs. This has been the tribute to the Big Nasty, Joe McDonnell, on ESPN LA.